This is a gorilla. Your folks are both gorillas. You are a gorilla.
They propose revisions that always seem to involve less respect for the rights of free nations and less freedom for the individual. These matters would be difficult under any circumstances. They are further complicated by a trend in Western countries away from global engagement and democratic confidence. Parts of Europe have developed an identity crisis. We have seen insolvency, economic stagnation, youth unemployment, anger about immigration, resurgent ethno-nationalism, and deep questions about the meaning and durability of the European Union. America is not immune from these trends. In recent decades, public confidence in our institutions has declined. Our governing class has often been paralyzed. The American dream of upward mobility seems out of reach for some who feel left behind in a changing economy. Bigotry seems emboldened. Politics seems more vulnerable to conspiracy theories and outright fabrication.
You both were members of Skull and Bones, a secret society at Yale. What does that tell us?
Not much, because it's a secret.
Is there a secret handshake? Is there a secret code?
I wish there were something secret I could manifest.
322, a secret number?
There are all kinds of secrets.
Now, as you may know, my running mate, Tim, is Catholic and went to Jesuit schools. And one of the things he and I have talked about is this idea from the Jesuits of the Magis, the more, the better.
Hello, everybody. Today is Saturday, March 24th, 2018, and Jörg Listman and I are gathered here on Skype for another reading of Code Word Barbelon. And we are on, was it chapter 25, Jörg?
Yes.
Yes, ruling through the Bavarian Illuminati. So welcome to the reading, Jörg, and thanks for being an encouragement and support for me, too. And pleasure to have your studies and recordings that you've done on Hour of the Truth and Inquisition Update, Tom Fress. Just hoping that Tom will have the energy to continue in his ministry too here in the future. And welcome, brother.
Well, thank you, Brett. Thank you for the invitation, and I'm happy that we are here together on a Sabbath day where I have a shining sun all afternoon already, and this is really the first day of a little bit springtime. We were doing a little walk, my mother in the wheelchair with me and the dog. For an hour, we went to the horses and fed them a few pounds of carrots for the horses and the goats that were there. And I'm really enjoying this weather today, and that's just wonderful. And when the sun shines like this, I am at least even more motivated to get into a nice reading. Good. Because today I took not only because of the Sabbath, but I really took a little bit on a break because yesterday I did 3 readings. The Code Word Barbelon we did together, and then I did another reading of did the Catholic Church give us the Bible book, which I very much enjoy myself with. And then I did a German reading of this Griesinger book again about the history of the Jesuits, and I was coming to the part of the Jesuit missions in Asia, reading about Francis Xavier, how he got into Japan, and how he failed there in Japan, and how he tried to turn it around and failed again, and then learned that the religion of Japan at that time was the religion actually of coming from China, Buddhism. Then he said, I have to go then to China. So then he went back to Goa in India, but then he stranded on an island on the way to China. He never arrived there. So reading all that stuff about Francis Xavier, very, very interesting. I have to tell you. So this book from Griesinger on the Jesuits from 1866 is a real book I advise everybody to get his hands on. You can get the download free from the internet of the PDF for the moment to read that for yourselves. It's really a great book. So I did 3 readings yesterday, and therefore I am pumped up even to do today at least this one reading in Code Word Barbelon. We are reading Ruling Through the Bavarian Illuminati, dealing with the time of 1776 and onward, because that is the year that the Illuminati were founded.
Man, I gotta just say something. You just triggered something. In the United States here, Yerk, we had a bicentennial in 1976, and I was
know.
just a young guy when this happened.
Me
And
too. I was
boy,
10
oh
years
boy,
old.
I'll tell you, this country was just all pumped up about 1976 bicentennial. There were flags made, Spirit of 76. So you have the Spirit of 76, even the gas station, 76 back then, and it was a big deal, and this patriotism really, really fuels the whole historic agenda to just shut it down. So no one ever looks beyond 1776 because, we got our independence. That's when we became a real country.
Yeah, we stood up for no taxation without representation.
Oh, jeez. Okay, I just started listening to Tom Press's archive there of the Ark and the Dove, and I'm on March 25th right now. That was just incredible. That
Still in the beginning.
really started opening up.
Yeah.
March 25th, 2010, for anyone that has access to his archive on First Amendment Radio.
That's still in the beginning of that book reading that goes on for about 3 months.
Yeah, it's just, wow. That's going to be something else, I am sure.
Mm-hmm.
So
okay, let's go and read about reform of an older order, which the next part of this chapter is called.
Page 264 for those of you that have the book, and you should get the book if you don't have it. It's a great book to have, right, Yerk?
Yeah, especially since you can get this book for the same money that you need to buy for a ticket to go to the cinema for.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, much better investment.
Much better investment to get this book.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. So the author says here, another little considered fact is that at the time when Loyola established the Jesuits, there already existed a sect called the Alumbrados, the Enlightened or Illuminated, which was a secret mystic movement in Spain during the 16th and 17th centuries. Didn't we speak about that last time?
Mm-hmm.
That almost nobody ever links the Illuminati to the Los Alumbrados. I think we spoke about that, huh?
Yes, we did.
And as we read earlier, Loyola was put in jail for being a member of the Spanish Illuminati, the Alumbrados. Quote, Ignatius was suspected of being a member of the Illuminati and was thrown into prison by the Inquisition. Upon his release, he made his way to Salamanca, the great university, but being suspected of Illuminism, was again thrown into prison. Unquote. Thus, contrary to accepted opinion, the Illuminati did not begin with Adam Weishaupt, but had always been a major influence in Jesuitism from the time the Society of Jesus was founded by Ignatius of Loyola. In fact, Leopold Engel says that Weishaupt was the head of the revived order of the Illuminati, and the Jesuits are the revived head of the Knights Templars. Huh? They revived everything. Huh?
Yes.
Indeed, Weishaupt himself originally claimed that the Illuminati originated from the Zoroastrian religion of the last king of Persia, Yat-Zagarat III, who lived between 632 and 651 before Christ. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
This is an interesting connection that is made.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, this is a confirmation of that there's nothing new under the sun. But things that were before and were outlived, were forbidden, were extolled, were exterminated, quote unquote exterminated, always come up and pop up with their ugly heads again out of the dust of history. Catholic priest, quote unquote Father John Hogan, is even more conclusive. He writes, quote, the Jesuits are well known as reforms of older orders, unquote. And the Jesuit priest Malachi Martin said the same thing. We quote again the observation of Schuster, quote, it is a strange phenomenon in the history of the Roman Church that every time there is a crisis of extraordinary value, new Masonic orders are called forth, and that is how the Jesuits came into being." Unquote. The crisis which called forth the Jesuit order, as we have already discovered, was the Reformation, started by the German monk Martin Luther. If we look at the Illuminati, we will see a direct semblance, or resemblance, I guess, between Jesuitism and Illuminism. No marvel, for as we saw, Weishaupt based his order on the constitutions of the Jesuits. Thus, it is impossible to resist the conviction that Weishaupt simply disavowed and distanced himself from the Jesuits after 1773 to keep his professorship while remaining a Jesuit, and so he was able to more effectively work for the revival of his order. And by the way, he lost his professorship anyway, I think in 1778, if I'm not mistaken. Significantly, Weishaupt himself appears to confirm this. He wrote to his collaborator, Cato, aka or also known as Zwack, a lawyer, quote, "I have the art to draw advantage even from misfortune, and when you would think me sunk to the bottom, I shall rise with new vigor." Who would have thought that a professor at Ingolstadt was to become the teacher of the professor of Göttingen and of the greatest men in Germany? Unquote. What misfortune was he referring to? And what did he mean by sunk to the bottom? From what did he rise with new vigor? These words were written before Weishaupt's Illuminati order was banned from Bavaria, so he could only have been referring to the fall of the Jesuits and their disgraceful expulsion from most of Europe. It was from that quote-unquote misfortune which he, as an quote-unquote ex-Jesuit, shared, i.e. sunk, and it was the fall that he was plotting to rise with new vigor. Weishaupt's other statements also seem to confirm our conclusion. He wrote to Cato, and this is in the same way, another name, just a name for in the society, as he called himself. What was it? Castor. I don't know. He had a very prominent name of that Adam Weishaupt. He called himself. Let's go back. In one of the pages earlier, we read this.
Sorry, I am drawing a blank. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's on the tip of my tongue, and I'd really like to share with our viewers now the name that he gave himself during the in the Illuminati order. He had a very controlling name, a very, very high name. And anyway, I can't come to that right now. People have to look that up again by going back a few pages and see what Weishaupt called himself in this order, because I can't find it right now. But they give them all these special names, and this is why we are talking about this Cato, who in civilian name was called Zwack. That was his normal German name. So he wrote to Cato in his letter, "In another situation and in an active station in life, I should have been keenly occupied, and the founding of an order would have never come into my head." So from his own pen, we learn that the founding of the Illuminati was due not to his having fallen out with the Jesuits, but rather, in his own words, he was no longer in another situation. Weishaupt makes no mention of his alleged fallout with the Jesuits as the reason for his actions. But the clincher comes from another of Weishaupt's statements, which Professor Robeson records, but seemed not to have fully grasped. I reproduce here, in part, the statement of Professor Robeson, for the purpose of showing this real and logical connection between Weishaupt's Illuminati and the Jesuits. Robeson writes in chapter 2 of his book, Proofs of a Conspiracy, quote, "Weishaupt had a long Weishaupt had long been scheming the establishment of an association or order, which in time should govern the world. He hinted to several ex-Jesuits the probability of their recovering under a new name the influence which they formerly possessed. Unquote. So that means prior to their suppression in 1773, the influence they possessed. Okay? Does that sound like someone who was a quote-unquote bitter enemy of the Jesuits? Spartacus. Spartacus was his name.
Okay.
I told you.
Whose name now?
Adam Weishaupt's name in the Order of the Illuminati.
Thank you. Good.
Was Spartacus.
Spartacus. Okay.
Cool. I told you, my brain just keeps spinning around because I know that I know.
Well,
So
I'm glad that you're retaining some of this because I have to work pretty hard at this.
All the time reading, I'm thinking of that. Now finally it comes to my head. So Spartacus and the other guy's name was Cato. Okay, so.
Excellent.
Does that sound like someone who was a bitter enemy of the Jesuits? Why would an enemy of the Jesuits hint to several ex-Jesuits the probability of their recovering under a new name? This, as I have said, is the smoking gun. My proposition, P.D. Stewart continues here, therefore, must now be obvious, that when Antichrist Pope Clement XIV suppressed the Order of Loyola in 1773, Lorenzo Ricci, the Jesuit general, shrewdly reconstituted his order by using Adam Weishaupt to form the Illuminati.
Yep. In the footnote says, Ricci was the 18th Superior General of the Society of Jesus.
Yeah, I know.
No big deal.
No, I know that he was a Superior General of the Society of Jesus. I don't know why that is important that he was the 18th, except that you want to go into the Kabbalah and say 18 is 3 times 6.
Ooh. Wow, that's an interesting point. Okay, you're sorry to interrupt.
No, it's no problem. You know?
I'm glad I did, actually. Got to tap in there once in a while. What are you thinking, Jörg?
I mentioned Lorenzo Ricci already numerous times because Tapasauce goes very deep into Lorenzo Ricci's generalship.
Well, there was another 18 here. Wait a second. We're in 2018 right now. Didn't you do a broadcast on that a while back on that? Something about that paper between the Lutherans and the Catholics. And they brought that out in 1999.
That paper of the Lutherans and the Catholics, the Joint Declaration of Justification, was signed in 1999.
Yep.
And that was 18 years before the 500th anniversary of the Reformation Day Martin Luther nailing his thesis to the church door in Wittenberg.
Was it really on October 31st too?
They signed the paper with the Roman Catholic Church on the 31st of October, 1999, on Reformation Day. No, I'm
serious?
Not. Yes.
Oh shit!
I am. So, and that is exactly 18 years before the 500th anniversary.
Turd. Ugh. That really stinks.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, no wonder I remember that one.
So that's 18 years before the 500th anniversary of Martin Luther nailing the thesis to the church door in Wittenberg, and 18 is 666.
They really, really do use this Kabbalah, don't they?
Yeah, sure. You know.
Yeah. All right, sorry.
Also because 18 is 1 and 8. 1 and 8 is 9, and if you turn 9 around, you got 6.
Oh,
and 3 times 6 is 18. I mean, these are the things they think in, you know.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Distorted, I know, but that's the way they are.
Well, it works out in the unholy spirit that way, just like it does in the Holy Spirit the other way. You know, it's the exact opposite.
That's true. That's the exact opposite, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So Lorenzo Ricci, the Jesuit general, shrewdly reconstituted his order by using Adam Weishaupt to form the Illuminati. What P.D. Stewart writes here is something that I have said all along. That is something that I understood already when I read Tapasauce's book. It was all a joke.
Mm-hmm.
No king ever had the quote-unquote power to throw out the Jesuits without their consent. They would have never agreed to that without their consent. The spiritual power always is above the temporal power. Don't forget that in Roman Catholic canon law. And the Jesuits are a military order of the Roman Catholic Church. No king ever tells them what to do. If a king gets rid of the Jesuits, it is including their agreement. And if it is not with their agreement, like it was, for example, in Germany in 1872, like it was, for example, in the 1600s in the 16th century in Japan, when they were thrown out, they will go back and have their revenge. Why didn't they revenge on all the other countries and city-states that threw out the Jesuits through the time? Because that was planned. That was all part of the scheme.
Yeah, sure was.
So, Weishaupt was merely the quote-unquote nominal founder and played a subordinate, though conspicuous role in the organization of this sect. Well, if it is a sect, okay, if the Illuminati is a sect, then it also means that it is taken out of a bigger part, because that's what a sect is, right?
That's right.
When you terminate
Sectarian.
the word
Yep.
sectarian, that is taken out of a bigger whole.
That's right.
So when you call the Illuminati a sect in the organization of its sect, as it is written here, and we see this, this account is given by Lady Queensborough in Occult Theocracy, and cited on page 313 of her book. And when she mentions here that the organization of this sect, the Illuminati, is a sect, so that means there must be a higher organization where this sect is coming from. Like the Roman Catholic Church likes to refer to all the Protestant churches as sects, because they eventually, in the first place, came out of the Roman Catholic Church, right? So Roman Catholic Church is the mother organization of all of which all the Protestant churches are just sects, came out of it. And when here the Illuminati are mentioned as a sect, then the organization it came out of course, was the Jesuits. That's how you have to understand books like this. In short, Weishaupt entered into an intrigue with the Jesuits, and within 13 short years his new Jesuit Freemasonry, which he termed Illuminati, had spread throughout all of Europe like the plague. Like the Jesuits when they first were founded, eh? Thus, even at the time when they were supposed to have been suppressed, the Jesuits continued under a different guise, a quote-unquote new name, and Weishaupt was still able to maintain an invisible league with his band order. So confident was General Ricky of the indestructibility of the Society of Jesus that in 1764, before the suppression of his order, when asked by the King of France to modify the constitutions of the Jesuits, he replied, "Let them be as they are, or else not be." For despite the 1773 bull or breve of Clement XIV of the Society of Jesus corporate existence was officially maintained in Prussia, Poland, and Russia by the then monarchs. In 1770, a year after the Spanish ban on the Jesuits, and 3 years before Pope Clement XIV issued his decree, Frederick II of Prussia, before he was the Great, wrote to the Jesuit-trained Voltaire, the famous French philosopher, quote, "I shall hoard the precious seed, the remnants of the Jesuits, in order to redistribute it one day to those who may wish to cultivate this rare plant in their own land." Unquote. Frederick did not merely hoard the precious seed, he took the vipers to his bosom using Freemasonry. This is a historically absolutely most important little paragraph of this book.
Wow.
That Frederick II of Prussia, who was later called Frederick the Great, was a at least 33rd degree Freemason, as far as my knowledge goes, sheltered the Jesuits like the Tsar from Russia did in the same time, and he actually said to Voltaire, "I shall hoard the precious seed in order to redistribute it one day to those who may wish to cultivate this rare plant in their own land."
Ugh. Yuck.
Well, I as a
Wow.
German have to think a few things through now, because the problem was Prussia was always the enemy of the south of Germany, of Bavaria, because Prussia was Protestant and Bavaria was Catholic. But then again, Prussia here was ruled, and I'm not speaking about the times of Martin Luther, I'm speaking of the times here in the 18th century.
Yeah.
Prussia here was ruled by a Freemason king.
Mm-hmm.
And since the Freemasons are led by the superior general of the Society of Jesus, the same as the papal knight orders are, who were ruling in Bavaria, Catholicism ruled all over Germany in that time, unbeknownst to most of the people. And this is a very important little proof that we have here.
Sounds like America today. In a
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
Strangely.
I know it must be interesting to get a hold of this book here that is mentioned in the footnote, Jesuits, a multi-biography on citation on page 300. I don't even know who the author was. J. Cretineau Joly. Oh, that's Histoire religieuse. That's another book. But maybe we can find that out some other day, who wrote this book, Jesuits, a multi-biography, where this letter is mentioned.
Oh, wow.
This is
you're not
so
kidding.
much important,
Yeah, that is.
It tells you that Voltaire was Jesuit trained, as I always said before already. That was a fact known, but here the author makes a point of that. And then all of a sudden, that Frederick II of Prussia stated already in 1770. I mean, this is 3 years before their banishment. So that was planned long time beforehand, that the Jesuits could take shelter in Prussia. Now, when you understand that, what is the bull of the Pope worth anyway? It's all a theater. It's all planned in advance.
It's a show.
It's a show.
The show continues.
He took the vipers to his bosom, using Freemasonry. We are told, quote, about the time that the order of Loyola was suppressed. These intriguing brethren had attempted to maintain their influence by the help of Freemasonry, unquote. The Jesuits aided the Frederick II of Prussia, wrote the higher degrees of Scottish Rite Freemasonry. In keeping his promise of 1770 to preserve or hoard the precious seed of the Jesuits, Frederick II decreed, "We, Frederick, by the grace of God, King of Prussia, to each and every one of our loyal subjects, greetings. We have resolved that this recently executed destruction of the Society of Jesus shall not be promulgated in our states. We graciously command you to take within your jurisdiction the steps necessary to render null and void the said bull or brief of the Pope, and expressly forbid, on pain of stern punishment, to publish the said papal bull. You will be most vigilant in ensuring that this prohibition be obeyed," unquote. Now, that's a bombshell, isn't it?
Yeah.
Everybody is ordered not to take note of the bull or brief of the Pope, of the banishment of the Jesuit order, because we in Prussia, we don't care whatever the Pope says. We make our own laws, and we stand firm with the Jesuit order. This is, in other words, what he says here. In 1770, 3 years before the bull even is promulgated. Encyclopedia Britannica 1910 edition on page 320 confirms, quote, its members were divided into three main classes: novices, minerals, and lesser Illuminati, the second consisting of Freemasons, unquote. Historian Edward Duller writes, I'm on the right page here. Historian Edward Duller writes, quote, thus constituted the Illuminati were, in some measure, a revivification of the Jesuits, although under the perverted use of a Freemason formula, unquote. Thus we see that the denial by Freemasonry that Frederick II had a hand in creating the higher Masonic degrees is as bold as it is baseless. Seeing that the Jesuits had such powerful allies on their side, the Pope, fearing the schismatic revenge of the Men in Black, made a complete right-about turn. In March 1774, the papal nuncio, Garempe, announced that the Clement XIV, before his untimely death, had authorized the Jesuits of Poland and Prussia to continue teaching, preaching, and administering the sacraments of the Church. In any event, the execution of the brief of suppression, having been largely left to the local bishops, allowed plenty of wiggle room for a good amount of variety in the treatment the Jesuits might receive in different places. I will next offer proof to show that the awful result of the attempted suppression of the Jesuits in 1773 resulted in chaotic and fearful scenes of revolution, which, according to Lord Acton, the Catholic peer, was not by chance or due to popular frenzy, but by design and calculating organization. In other words, frightful Jesuitism. Now, Brett, I would even suggest that we conclude the reading here today, even though it is a little shorter, but, this finishes this chapter 25, and then we go into chapter 26, Revolutions and Wars, the Bane of All Nations. Just thinking a little about what we just read here, and then knowing that during the time of the suppression of the Jesuits, the so-called abolishment, the United States of America was formed, and we have already in the outro that you made for Orwell's Lead to Rome,
yes,
Alberto Rivera saying that George Washington was the first Jesuit-controlled American president. Jesuit-controlled then during a time that the Jesuits, of course, were forbidden. So how forbidden were they? That's a question someone should ask. And also, you don't only have the founding of the United States of America, and with that, the starting of the rising of the beast out of the earth that spoke as a lamb and later became as a dragon, but also we have in that same time the French Revolution, the bloody French Revolution, where millions of people were killed and beheaded in France in that time.
Absolutely right. That is one portion of history that's just amazing to study too, I must add.
And then coming out of this French Revolution with the Declaration of Human Rights.
Yeah.
And that table, that picture that you can see on the internet, that table of the Human Rights Declaration that came out of the French Revolution.
Out of France, yep.
That has on the left and on the right a fascia.
Yes.
Yeah. So, therefore, it is so important to understand this book and really to look behind the scenes. And normally I'm not a guy who cuts a broadcast short for 25 minutes or something, but this reading was so information packed that I still need a little time to think about it and read here and there a little bit more again and let that sink in, especially on the situation with Frederick II of Prussia.
Yeah, that's right.
I knew that the Jesuits got refuge there, and they also found refuge in Russia, and of course Poland. That's just in between Russia and Prussia. There's Poland. But I was never aware of Frederick II writing already before the suppression letters, like the letter he wrote to Voltaire, and like the other one that he wrote here to, where is it? The Jesuits aided Frederick II of Prussia, wrote the higher degree Scottish Rite Freemasonry in keeping his promise to preserve. He decreed, so this decree that he wrote in 1770, where he said, "We, Frederick, by the grace of God, King of Prussia," and so on and so on. I mean, this is so important to understand, that actually you have to, even when you think you are doing real history studies, even then you have to ask again and check things, and double check things.
Sure.
Because things with history, and especially with the history of the Jesuits, are never as they appear to be.
Oh, you can say that again.
You know, you have that warning, Brett. It's just a short time ago that you had to buy a new truck for your work.
Oh,
And
yeah.
when you look at your review mirrors, there's always a little sticker that says objects in the rear view mirror appear closer than they are.
That's right.
Or right? Isn't that
Yes, that's correct.
there in
Yep.
that sticker?
Mm-hmm.
Well, that same warning label you should put on every book of history.
Yeah, no doubt.
That things taught in here are not as clear as they seem at first reading, at first glance, and that you really need a deeper study of different sources to make a whole picture work and understand. Yeah,
Especially with
So-
history. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
you know what this actually tells me is that even though that a lot of people think that Germany with the Second Reich, that Bismarck founded in 1871 after the war against France in 1870, and before that in 1866 at Kögnitz he defeated the south of Germany, Bavaria and Austria,
Mm-hmm.
the south of, and then he formed the Second Reich in 1871. That lasted till the end of World War I. That even that, because Prussia was a through and through controlled country by Freemasons, that even though it seemed on the outside that Protestantism had gained a success with Prussia leading Germany into better times, even as Griesinger said in his work, that there has never been a greater epoch for Germany than the time now when the empire, when the empire's government is coming to support Protestantism. I think that even all that was just a scheme. And we see that, of course, with the short-lived Kulturkampf of Bismarck, which only, the culture struggle that only lasted on for 8 years. And then Bismarck was, quote-unquote, defeated. It was Catholic all along. It was a Catholic play all along, just to make sure to give Germany, during the reign of Bismarck, the power that they could rise to win the First World War, which they actually did. Because at the end of World War I, not one Allied soldier set foot on German ground. Not many people know that, but Germany was, after World War I, not defeated like after World War II. Not one foreign soldier set foot on German ground at the end of World War I. They just agreed to terms destroying that country and then giving about 20 years to build it up again, and then becoming again the sword of the Roman Catholic Church, as Leo XIII, Pope, who ruled after Pius IX until 1903, ordered German Kaiser and told him that Germany needs to be, or needs to become, the sword of the Roman Catholic Church once again.
Mm-hmm.
That's just what they did. So when you see this history all together like this, and here you see the real Freemason roots of Prussia, then you have no other way but to distance yourself from any sympathy from Prussia or from anything else, and just to say they are all foul. They are all controlled by the Roman Catholic Church in one way or another. And when I, as a German, see that here during this reading with my country, you in the United States of America should see that with your country when you get through the book Rulers of Evil and the Ark and the Dove and find out who really founded your country. That is where the Calverts, the Carrolls, and the Jesuit priests who founded your country. And as Alberto Rivera said in the outro of All Roads Lead to Rome, that George Washington was the first Jesuit-led president by the United States of America. I'm sorry, Brett, but I think with this little history lesson, I just want to call it quits today. It was
I think so. I think that's
quite intense.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of thinking there, Jörg, and I appreciate all your insights and comments on this. And certainly a lot of things to think about here. And it's always good to take it easy a little bit with rich reading like this. There's a lot of things to be thought about here.
Yep. So next time we come together, maybe tomorrow, and then we can start. Then we can continue on page 269 of the book.
Yeah, and that is chapter 26, Revolution and Wars, the bane of all nations, order ab chaos, or cow, I should say, right? Order out of chaos.
Order out of chaos, yeah.
Do you want to read that quote, Jörg, just to give them a taste?
We are prepared to deluge Europe in blood in order to recover the Pope's temporal power, Cardinal Manning said. And they bathed Europe in blood not only through the, of course, in this chapter, upcoming French Revolution, but also in the years after that.
Yeah, it's very interesting history to study and not to be taken lightly either. Very heavy stuff.
Yep.
Very. All right, Jörg. Whoops, I just lost my my audio here. I'm sorry, but could you close it up, Jörg, this time?
Yeah, of course. So thank you very much, everybody, for watching and listening and probably reading along. I hope at least that you are. And by that being edified, by even this is a secular book and not the Bible, but always put the Bible in the first place. Always put your Bible study in the first place. Everything that we read in books like Code Word Babylon, Rulers of Evil, and all the other books is only a confirmation of that what God told us already 2,000 years ago when he finished the Bible. Everything is written in there. When you go into Revelation, you can see all these things being foreshadowed because the Bible prophecies are nothing else but history written in advance. And the Holy Spirit will lead us into all truth as Jesus promised. But we have to make sure that we have the real Holy Spirit, that we have the real Spirit leading us into all truth, and that we are not caught by a false spirit by adhering to a false Bible. Therefore, it is absolutely necessary for you to have a 1611 King James Bible that is not forgerized, and when studying that with the right mind, you will be led by the Holy Spirit into all truth. And with that, I want to close the broadcast for today. Thank you, Brett. Thank you, listener. Until next time, Maranatha.
That for the first time in human history, for the first time in all of human history, almost all of mankind is politically awake. And these new and old major powers face still yet another novel reality, in some respects unprecedented. And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. I once put it rather pungently, and I was flattered that the British Foreign Secretary repeated this, as follows. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control a million people. Literally, it was easier to control a million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people. It is easier to kill than to control.
We're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict. And I believe that we've come horribly off track in the years since the fall of the Soviet Union. And we're starting now in the 21st century, which I believe strongly is a crisis both of our church, a crisis of our faith, a crisis of the West, and a crisis of capitalism.
His son Jesus is here in our midst. His bride, the church, is honored to host an event affirming the dignity of the human person and the sacredness of all human life.
I think Russia is no longer a communist state, first of all. That's very important to realize. It hasn't yet defined itself, however, effectively as a democracy. It is still uncertain.
We're at the very beginning stages of a very brutal and bloody conflict, of which if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, if the people in this room and the people in the church do not bind together and really form what I feel is an aspect of the church militant, to really be able to not just stand with our beliefs, but to fight for our beliefs against this new barbarity that's starting, that we will literally eradicate everything that we've been bequeathed over the last 2,025 years.
You didn't mention the president by name, but it was hard not to conclude that that's who you were referring to. Is that fair?
I was certainly referring to the threats that we are now facing with this stated goals of this administration, which would upset the last 70 years of a new world order which was established after World War II. 70 years based on human rights, respect for the law, free trade, all of the things, aspects of this world order that took place after one of the most horrific, terrible wars in history, and I'm for maintaining it.
We are grateful to be citizens of one nation under God, who acclaim this evening that in God we trust. Bless our two candidates, our benefactors, and those whom the L. Smith Foundation has been honored to serve for 7 decades. Guide us safely home, both this evening and for all eternity, through Christ our Lord. Amen.